Good evening, everybody. Oh, come on. Y'all are going to do this to me again. Good evening, everybody. There you go. Hey, it is wonderful to be here with you at the last plenary session of the evening. Exactly, yeah, it's a meeting. You want a meeting to begin and you want it to end. I understand that. So we're going to do this last plenary session, which will be fascinating to all of us, and then we're going to close out the celebration at the Museum of Science. So stick with us for the next hour or so, and this is going to be an excellent discussion, and then we're going to go explore the museum together. I do want to take a moment again to acknowledge our partners and supporters who've made it possible for us to gather here this week. Please save any applause for the end. So the 2025 annual meeting host university is Northeastern University. Then I also want to thank Arizona State University, the George Washington University, the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania, Morgan State University, the Georgia Tech School of Public Policy, Florida International University, Physicians Formula, Tufts University, the International Human Frontier Science Program Organization, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, the Tulane University School of Science and Engineering, AIP, and UL Research Institutes. Thank you all. Thank you for your support. That really means a lot because it helps this meeting happen. All right, so here on my agenda it says whatever else you want to say. So buckle up. Look, folks, this meeting has been, I think it's fair to say it's been extraordinary. It has been a moment when there is both great celebration. If you sat through those breakthroughs of science, if you sat through Phil Sharp's talk, if you went to the AJAS posters, you saw amazing science. You saw science that inspires, science that creates aspiration for all of us. But I also know that that's against a backdrop of angst and anxiety, and to a certain extent grief for some of the things that happened over the course of the time that we've been here together. And I want to acknowledge both those things. It is possible to both feel that celebration and to feel that angst at the same time. But this meeting has been filled with wonders and breakthroughs in science. But one of the things that's been asked of me is, what can I do? What can I do? Now, I've told you at our beginning that the AAAS is committed to protecting and strengthening the scientific enterprise, and in the short term, ensuring that the worst of the possible, which is that the funding levels somehow get cut below where they are today. And there's a whole bunch of mechanics to that I'm not going to try to explain from this stage, but let me tell you again that Pi Day matters. March 14th is a big deal, and we're going to work on that. Now, one of the things that folks have asked me is, can I go talk about the cuts to science with members of Congress, and can I just send a template? Can you send me a template email? Please don't send a template email to Congress. Please, please, please don't send a template email to Congress. I spent 10 years working for the Senate Appropriations Committee, and I can tell you that doesn't work. If you want to engage with Congress, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Go make a meeting in your district with your member of Congress, with the staff for your member of Congress, and meet with them there. And talk about the benefits to your state or your district from that research. Do that. Do not send a template email. That hurts the cause. You showing up in person, maybe with a group of friends who talk about the impact on your university or on your district in terms of jobs, in terms of potential research output, in terms of lost patents, that makes a difference. So if you want to do that, go do that. Please go do that. I also want to tell you that that feeling of wanting to do something is powerful. It is powerful. Do not let it go. Do not let it go, because I tell you, it drives me. It drives me to know that me and the team here at AAAS are going to work 24/7 over the next 3 or 4 weeks to ensure that March 14th has a good outcome. And we'll let you know about that. We'll communicate it with you. But then we have more work to do. We have more work to do, because yes, that is getting you through fiscal year 2025. That ends, by the way, in October, September 30th, for those who are counting. And that means that this This is not a one-time battle, my friends. This is a story. We are in a story, and that story is still being written. And we're in the middle of the beginning right now. And so those of you who believe in the scientific enterprise and the good that it can do for the country and for the world, have to speak up. But do it in a way that actually makes impact. Please do it in a way that makes impact. And so please, call up those congressmen and women and visit them in their offices and tell them about the impact on your district. And the second don't do is do not call up members in whose district you do not live. Because you know what that does? That energizes them. That energizes them. So please don't do that. Talk to your congressperson, not somebody else's. Talk to your senator, not somebody else's. And if we can harness that, we will make a difference. But I will tell you that the AAAS and other scientific societies, other patient advocacy organizations, other members of industry, other foundations, there is a common cause and common will and common energy. And it's been building up over the course of this weekend and during this meeting in the times when I'm not bending your ear from this stage. So thank you very much for wanting to have those ideas. But here's what I'm going to leave you with, and here's the thought I want to leave you with, which is that there is a story that is still being written, but if you're going to actually write that story, you have to be willing to be a protagonist. You have to be willing to say that this is what I think the world ought to look like. And so please, as you feel angst, as you feel the weight of what is happening in the world, also know that your own optimism, your own aspiration, your own inspiration is what translates into forward movement. So don't lose that. Do not lose that. That is what actually moves us forward. So this is a time that someday you'll look back and you'll say, I did this then. I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of the movement I was a part of. I'm proud of the organizations that I associated myself with. And I hope that you can say that I was proud to associate myself with the AAAS during that time. Thanks, everybody. All right, the rest of my job is simple. It's really simple. I get to introduce my colleague, my friend, and my fellow North Carolinian with a slightly different accent, and the moderator of tonight's discussion, the editor-in-chief of Science and the Family of Journals, Dr. Holden Thorpe. Holden?
Well, that's a good start. Thanks, boss. I suggest you follow his instructions and not mine. I was the chancellor of the University of North Carolina for 5 years, and I was spectacularly unsuccessful at getting the state legislature of North Carolina to do anything. So I let Sudha take care of all that stuff. So thanks for that, boss. We appreciate that. I have a happy job, which is to introduce an absolutely spectacular panel, and I'll call them and ask them to come up. We're going to be talking about funding science around the world. And so we have people from everywhere to talk to us about that. And I think as we deal with the chaos and struggles that we have in the United States, it couldn't possibly be more important. And of course, we didn't think about this when we planned this, but it worked out extremely well for us to get some international perspective, both on the feelings and experiences that we're all having, and also to be reminded that there's lots of great science going on around the world, regardless of whether the United States can get out of its own way or not. So I would like to introduce Monica Bertagnolli, formerly the director of the National Institutes of Health. And I just have to, this is kind of one with some special privilege. Monica selfishly went to the NIH and gave everything she had to the health enterprise in the United States. And she did it knowing she might not be there more than 5 months, and she still did such a spectacular job. And we can all learn so much from her leadership and the model that she gave to us all. So Monica, thank you for what you did for the United States of America. Inspirational. Charlotte Dean is from UK Research and Innovation, as we call UKRI. It's the major funder of research in the United Kingdom. Dorothy Ngila from the National Research Foundation of South Africa. And on the screen, Maria Lepton from the European Research Council. All right, well, we've got some important things to talk about. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the four people on this panel don't have something in common with me, in case you've noticed. So thank goodness we have folks of both, that we have men and women leading the science enterprise in this day, and let's hope we can continue to have that. So I'm going to ask first about the experience that we're having in the United States with the chaos and the, frankly, destruction of our scientific enterprise and the psychic injury that we're all experiencing for lots of legitimate reasons. First, from Monica's perspective, since she's perhaps seen it as close as anyone can, but then from our international colleagues to really do two things throughout this. One is to give their sense of what it looks like from the outside about what's going on here, but also to remind us that the actions of the United States have ripple effects around the world. We're going to turn that around in some later questions, but we'll start with this one. So, Monica?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much, Holden. I'm so grateful to be here. This is such an amazing meeting. I'll go quickly over things that I think are going to be obvious to all of you. First of all, there is a great deal of confusion. And I can tell you with the good people at the NIH and everyone out there in the biomedical research world, confusion, not understanding what the future, even immediate future looks like, is paralyzing. You know, every time we launch a new program, every time we continue to commit resources to ongoing work, those are important decisions that we make literally every single day. And in times like this, that decision-making is paralyzed. And what that means is that critical work is not going forward like now as it should. And time is so incredibly valuable in what we do. So even if someone can wave a magic wand and by tomorrow everything is back the way we want it to be, we've lost a lot in this time of confusion. That's number one. Number two, we have a lack of senior leadership at NIH and at HHS right now because they have a mandate to be disruptive, because we've all been told that the new administration wants to be very disruptive. People even within the agencies now who traditionally have really helped hold down the fort and keep good work going, but they can't move forward with even planned and already funded work. And the examples I'll give you critical to NIH that fit this are the newly launched Women's Health Initiative, the Care for Health research initiative that unites unites primary care clinicians with researchers in under-resourced locations to try to really move the needle on our health disparities and diseases of despair. Also, the critical new and important data initiatives of the National Library of Medicine. Nothing is more important right now for our growing biotechnology universe than data. And I even heard that PubMed went down today because PubMed went down today. I hope it's back up, but this was due to staffing issues at NIH. Next, we've had a loss of talented leaders Larry Tabak, Mike Lauer, absolute treasures of our world. I had so much confidence, could make so progress. It was a little more than 5 months. It was actually 14 months.
Oh.
That's okay.
You said something about 5 months?
I was only 5 months at NCI.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Before I had to think about a transition.
Thank you for straightening me out.
That's where it got confused. But you know, those two leaders, I can tell you, unsung heroes who have contributed so much and still had so much more to give to our work of everyone. And then finally, we really do have seen since day one, really since Inauguration Day, I would say, a loss of momentum for work to reduce health disparities, which are so horrible, horribly unfair in our world. They are contributing to the very poor life expectancy that we have in this country because those people who suffer from health disparities and who suffer from the diseases of despair are disproportionately young and die young, and they are responsible for our what I think is a national, avoidable and treatable national tragedy. And why do I think this is really a serious issue? Because these programs have been tangled up along with the anti-DEIA movement. And so whether I'm just kind of illustrating even an unintended consequence, I would hope, but a very serious one. So that's where we are, Holden. I'm sorry to say.
No, thanks for the straight talk. Okay, Charlotte, how does this look in the United Kingdom?
So I think the first thing to say is, obviously, America is the largest partner on research with the United Kingdom. It's a huge partnership that we have. And it is very clear we're already feeling the ripple effects of this, sort of the awareness of what's changing and what that might mean inside our system, but also trying to work out how you keep international science going. You know, it's really, really important. It is a global endeavor to do research, and being able to know that you can do this and how it will balance and work across the borders. I think there is also a general feeling of wanting to know, how do we help and support and make the case as clear as possible and as easy as possible for us to continue to work together in sensible ways and build strong collaborations and not turn this into something where everything kind of breaks apart as people worry about what might or could or, you know, because it's that thing that is probably the worst possible effect. As you say, it's the kind of freezing of everything and everybody worrying about what might happen, rather than pointing out the most important thing is to do what we do and keep doing it really well, and keep making the case about how important it is to keep doing it that well.
Great. Dorothy?
So, I mean, for several years now, we have been discussing VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That is how I would describe what has happened. In the same way that Charlotte speaks about the US partnership in the UK, it's exactly the same in the South African context. I come from the National Research Foundation of South Africa, our largest public funder. We are not directly influenced or impacted by what has happened, but we know that the South African research ecosystem is impacted. We know that the African ecosystem is impacted. It's in the education alliances, it's in bursaries and scholarships, it's in HIV and AIDS treatment programs, it is in research programs that have been in the area of agriculture, in the area of health, in the area of climate change. And what is really concerning is the ways in which the information is in flux, which is why we talk about the volatility. We have to reflect on what that looks like for South Africa, what it looks like for the African continent. It's a confusing time. It's a VUCA moment.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. All right, Maria. And I'd just like to say thanks for staying up late. You're in Europe, so we appreciate you making time for us tonight.
Pleasure. Yes, so what can I add? I can't really add. I mean, we are, I have to say, looking on with our eyes glued on our computer screens for news from what's going on over there for you guys. I think most of the important things have been said. Tudip himself, I think, summarized very importantly what he said, both a few days ago in his speech at the Committee on Space and Technology, and then just in his introduction. And today, Harold Varmus, I think, really summarized it very well in his piece in the New York Times. I don't know if he's there with you today, but he reminds us that ever since Vannevar Bush wrote his piece for President Franklin Roosevelt, outlining a blueprint for national research, he says government agencies have funded basic science conducted in universities, research institutes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this way, the United States has come, I'm reading his piece, has come to lead the world in nearly all fields of science and technology. We all feel that. Cynical voices are saying, well, maybe we get some of our own scientists back from the US. I think that is cynical and missing the point totally, and the price is far too high. Harold goes on to say the rewards have been evident in virtually every aspect of human life, including medicine, agriculture, national defense, and manufacturing. And then he goes on to say at the end of his piece what Tudip said, what is needed is that those of us who value the spirit of discovery need to issue a strong outcry. And I think that's right. I think if we, the scientists, don't do this at this point, how can we expect the rest of the population to stand up to this outrageous breach of democratic principles? So that's my position from Europe. We really care most of all that this is rectified, that the principles of good governance and democracy are respected. And if that happens, then the NIH and NSF, et cetera, will all be okay again. In the meantime, I'm glad to see, Holden, that you still dare to use the word women. And don't buckle.
Okay.
So,
and I'll say DEI too, if it makes everybody feel good. Yes. All right, great. So we'll go in the backwards in the order we went, because now I want to ask you, our international colleagues, you've all had disruptive things happen where you are, certainly. We can all think of them. We've had Brexit.
Nothing.
We know a lot about the stories of South Africa, and many things have happened in Europe that are also disruptive. So when you're in your roles administering grants and there's this kind of uncertainty going on, and then we'll end with Monica, because she certainly saw plenty of challenges while she was there. What do you like to see the institutions and researchers doing? Because, you know, everybody's asking, what should we do? So from the point of view of the funders, and not just in the US, what's the best thing that institutions and researchers can be doing in times like this? So Maria, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, we have to, we're thinking along the same lines. We are the Europe, I head the organization that funds at the European level, not at the national levels, fundamental science. We constantly have to explain to our politicians and policymakers the value of fundamental science. And I say the same thing to our constituents, the grantees, the researchers, to go and talk to their own members of parliament or whatever it may be, and explain the value for their own communities. In fact, fortunately, our commissioner for research has asked us, the ERC, for examples of projects, and this is something that your citizens, all our colleagues in the US should think about, examples of projects that were funded that either put money in the pocket of the citizens on the ground, or help them in other ways. And I think that's the most important thing to do. Politically, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, because people tend to forget that there is a pipeline from discovery. That's what Vannevar Bush, of course, recognized, and the entire well-being of the entire of our countries relies on that. So we do need individuals to remind individual policymakers of the value of what we're doing.
Perfect. Okay. Dorothy.
So I think we have to think about what is the sphere of control here that a funder has, that a research institution has, a university has. What we've started doing now in the National Research Foundation is to really identify the impacted programs, then start working together with the different researchers, with the different universities to really explore some solutions. Is there a need for realignment? Do we source new funding mechanisms? How do we identify new funding opportunities? And I would say, very importantly, this is a real moment for science diplomacy, to advocate for, to ensure that researchers are coming together, working in partnership with the funders, working in partnership with all the leaders of the science enterprise, really to push, to understand that we need to build trust in science, but we also need to get policymakers to understand the value of science in a very different way, almost taking on the role of advocacy, the role of lobbying as researchers in a way that we may not always be comfortable, but it is a moment of making sure that we can protect what is going to be the sustainability of our science enterprise going forward.
Charlotte?
I think it's very likely we're all going to say very much the same thing here. It is very easy when you're in a room like this, full of people who've worked in science, worked with science, seen what it does, done research, to go, isn't this obvious? But it's not obvious. It really isn't to the rest of, they do other things and they think about other things, and there are many, many other important things in their heads. So it is always key for us to be able to think, how do I explain what I do that actually has an impact on lives, that is something that would generate economic growth, that does provide societal good or is good for the public services? This is a continuous case, and it runs through from the funders doing that. I mean, a large part of my job is speaking to people in government and civil service in the UK, explaining and explaining and explaining. And it's the case studies and it's the numbers. But it is also incumbent on individual scientists to do this. We cannot sit back, I'm an academic for the other half of my life, and go, well, everyone should know what I do is worth it. My phrase on this is, I have this thing which I say a lot, which is, I should be able to explain to my mum why this is a good idea. So my mum has not much of an idea of what I do for my research career. She was a school secretary. But effectively, she pays my salary because it's public money. So if I cannot even explain to her why it is important that I am allowed to do research and that research will make a difference to people's lives, then I'm not doing very well. So I think it is incredibly important that we think about it in those terms, that it is a privilege to get to do this, and it is one that is important. I firmly believe it's very important. And each of us in our individual places can do that. So as people have said, it's really important to talk to the people who are local to you, be that your representatives in those areas, but also local to you, local to your university, local to where you work. But it is also important if you're... It's also important if you're part of a larger organization where you're allowed into other types of rooms. It's amazing discovering for me the types of rooms I've been allowed into for last year. To do the same thing, to explain it in the terms that the people the other side of the table can understand. Because it is really important, and we have an absolute responsibility to make that case. Because if we think it's that important, we have to make sure we've made the case so it will happen, so that research and innovation will make a difference going forward.
Perfect. Okay. Monica?
So it's difficult to add much to what's been said, but I will say one thing a little bit aside. I just want to say on behalf of the 1,500 people just at NIH alone who received a notification that they would no longer be employed yesterday, and then, you know, play that out over our other federal agencies and federal programs that have influence on health and on science. I just can tell you how profoundly grateful they are for you standing up, for your support, for you explaining how this is a true loss for everyone, not just them. And just to say that I know that that community that has had this blow harder than any of us have had to do so far, are just so very grateful for your voices right now.
Right on to that. Yeah, wonderful. Yep. I may not be an expert on getting money out of legislative bodies, but dealing with these kinds of things that happen in institutions, I've spent a lot of time doing, and it's all about compassion and caring for each other and recognizing the anguish and pain and grief that, as Sudip said, that we're all going through. At some point, things will settle down, and we'll know what we have, and we'll have to grieve the things that we've lost. But we'll also have to stoop down and build them back. And these kinds of things have happened around the world, not just here. So, you know, not everybody's going to be ready to be thinking about how we're going to build this back at the same time. We have to let everybody get to that point on their own schedule. But one day, that's what we'll be doing. And those of us who've devoted our lives to this are certainly going to do everything we can to reclaim everything that we fought for. So how should we go about getting ready to do that and thinking about what it's going to mean when there's something left here and we all have to figure out, are we shifting the diseases we're working on or the topics we're doing, and we have to figure out a lot of the things that are important in our values. How do we figure out how to continue to do those even with the constraints that we've been given? So Charlotte, I'm going to start with you since Brexit was another cataclysmic thing that happened, and your whole agency was created as a result of it. So
I guess I think about this in terms of what we want to achieve, why we do this, and the things that we want to take forward as we do that. So I think in the future, as we're looking at it now, if I stop thinking about what's happening in terms of the processes, the people, if I think about, we're in a really exciting time. Right? It's amazing what's happening in research right now. If you think about what AI is going to do across science and research, it's going to completely change the way pretty much every discipline operates. We need to be ready to take advantage of that. It's going to change the way we might want to fund research. It's going to change the way we might want to assess research. So we need to think about those kinds of things. We need to think about things that may be a bit less comfortable, but it's certainly, you know, the world is I would say, in a less friendly state across many countries than it has been. We need to work out how research plays its role in that, providing solutions, keeping things connected, building up the things we need around that. And probably the one that I've spent most time thinking about trying to build back is the questions around talent. The scariest thing for me when these things happen is the loss of talent or the potential loss of talent or the not having the trained workforce. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean the trained workforce for academia. I mean the workforce that academia trains that makes a difference in terms of all the companies they're involved in, all of the other places they work, the agencies they work in, all of the things that they go on to do. And so for me, the building back is all about how do you make sure that you have the people and what are the areas that we're really going to have to make sure we make a difference in so that the future can see it and we just keep looking towards that.
Great. Dorothy?
I'm going to come at it from a different perspective. The continent is affected by what has happened. And the question of what does sustainability look like for the continent at the moment is one at front and center. So every crisis gives us a gift, right? And the gift here is in at least 3 areas. We have a significant gift on the continent in South Africa to really start prioritizing local and domestic sources of funding. We have been talking about it, 1% of our GDP to research and development, and here is an opportunity. It is just recently that we've come out of COVID, and we have learned from COVID that in many ways we are alone. Here is another moment that is giving us exactly the same consequence, exactly the same impact. So this question of sustainability, of funding our research and development on the continent is very high on the radar. I think encouraging more intra-Africa collaboration, South-South partnerships, and thinking about our global partnerships very, very differently is going to be another area that I would expect to move forward into as a continent. And the last one is something that I am specifically passionate about, which is around the question of equitable partnerships. What kind of a partnership are you in such that if suddenly it's taken away from you, you are left worse off than the way that you were before? And so we've got to bring back this conversation of moving away from the rhetoric to the practical of how to build equitable partnerships, global north, global south, south-south, whichever way, and to really think about building trust, building respect, thinking about the time to build trust and to build respect as well, and to enhance and ensure that there is always a sustainability plan that is linked to whatever partnership you're getting into. This is a massive gift that is being given to us in those 3 areas. Thanks.
Great. I'm going to go to Maria in a second, but there's a QR code if you want to send in questions. We'll only be able to answer a small number of them. Make sure they're questions, and they'll probably be prioritized if there's something multiple people on the panel can answer. By the way, if there are complaints or concerns or comments, you can send them to ablack@AAAS.org. Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to damp down the panic a little bit.
Good, okay.
I think US science is unbelievably strong and, you know, to the dismay of some in other parts of the world, but it's great. It's a boon. It's great, and so I think you will survive. Sure, universities will take a hit, and if these things are not reversed, and it'll be painful for a while. But it's not going to die. It's not going to be killed. It's not going to sort of drop off the radar of the rest of the world. It'll be less comfortable. I mean, look at my own country. I'm German. The Nazis really did the very best to purge Germany of all talent, and many left. But one rebounds. And this was disaster. You're not facing that disaster, I hope I can say yet. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the international connections are, I think now, which we all have naturally. I mean, as scientists, we all interact naturally. We all know each other. We have colleagues all over the world. They are, of course, now more important than ever. And I think we here in Europe will do anything to support you and to maintain those interactions and do whatever we can. Anyway, so that's, I mean, what others have said, of course, I totally subscribe to, but I think those are the 2 points I wanted to make. We must maintain our international connections more now than ever. And again, as scientists leading others that are sort of shuttering off, and whether it's tariffs or other things. Or consulting each other, as Vance did so successfully over the last couple of days here in Europe.
Wonderful, thanks. Monica.
Yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so generally what that means is you take a really hard look at what is essential, preserve that at all costs, figure out ways to work together better, more efficiently. You know, there's always, when in times of plenty, everyone can have their own. In times of scarcity, you gotta share. And so I think maybe we'll see some of that attitude, some of that collaboration more, bringing together teams. And then we have a very big ecosystem in science. I mean, we have the public sector, which is now going to be shrinking dramatically, we think, the contributions there. We've seen that in the last week. We have the private sector, which frankly has been booming, and has been booming because of the public sector feeding into it. Well, you know, the private sector may need, if there are things that the private sector needs to thrive that have previously been supported by all of our taxpayer dollars, maybe the private sector needs to be able to preserve them. So what are those things? It's a really interesting question. What are those things that our public funds have provided that our private research and development sector depends on critically that might not be there? So that's a really interesting question for that sphere to start thinking about, because I believe we have to take a long view of this. You know, I think whenever you hit disruptions like this, we don't rebound quickly. So I think taking a long view is going to be really critical, and thinking about that across all sectors is going to be very, very important. And then the last thing I will say, times like this always hurt disproportionately those who are just starting out, the young people, the next generation. I mean, if I were just finishing undergraduate school, trying to decide what I wanted, whether, you know, did I want to go to medical school? Do I want to pursue a PhD? Do I want to go into the workforce immediately? Things like the availability of a community that can sustain and support a career are critical, even that early on in people's decisions, and really do make tremendous difference in people's lives. So that's another thing that, if you had to ask me one thing that is definitely mission critical, it's the next generation who are going to be there after we're no longer here trying to fight the good fight.
Great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is try to do 2 audience questions and then 1 last question. So we'll see if we can do that. And I'm going to start with this first one here, and then I'm going to kind of add a little to it. So the question is, even if we rebound politically speaking, I think that's talking about the U.S., shouldn't we, that means all of us, still decentralize the global scientific enterprise so that it's not beholden to one local administration's quirks? And so I think we're all probably in agreement about that. And I guess I would start with Maria and say, you know, first of all, what should we all do? And we don't have anyone here from Asia, but of course, we get very important contributions to the world's scientific effort from Asia also. So how do we imagine a global scientific enterprise that is even more resilient because it's not dependent on these things? And if you want to get a little more science into this session, give us an example of where that could be particularly strong. So Maria.
Well, I mean, we have, it's very, very difficult, because I'm talking about the public funding, publicly funded science, because that's what we are, that's what the NIH is, et cetera. And that, of course, depends on local tax dollars or euros or whatever it may be. And so it's very hard to globalize that. And we see exactly that in Europe. Like I said, I lead the European Research Council, which covers a small percentage of total funding of research in Europe. everything else is national. So in a way, it's a good thing because we have the national funding, which varies vastly between the EU member states, and we have the European level funding, which also has associated countries like the UK or Switzerland, who are not part of the EU. So it works, but it's an uphill battle, and it was added very late to the EU portfolio because local taxpayers didn't see why they should give money to Europe at the European level to redistribute to scientists, and in our case, on the principle of excellence only, which means it's not equally distributed among countries, among the taxpayers who pay into the pot. So it's a wonderful thought, and it has huge benefits if it can be done, but it's a huge challenge to do.
Okay, great. Dorothy?
You can't run away from.
If I may say,
Sure.
the US is one of the countries, in my former position as the director of EMBO, European Molecular Biology Organization, I sort of invited non-European countries to join and was successful with the number, but US was never interested in the least to give an international organization money to award postdoctoral fellowships.
Yeah, shocker. Okay, all right.
You know, it's at our level, at the level of the scientists, we think it's a great idea, but at the level of those who deal with taxpayers' money,
Yeah.
they have other ideas.
Yeah. All right, Dorothy.
You can't really run away from public funding. I think the important part here is to make sure that we can rebuild trust in science. We can focus on the skill set that is required for science communication, science awareness, science education, so that we raise literate citizens who understand why it is important for the state to invest in research and to put the significant amount of money there is. That's the first part. And then the second part is to really focus on, once you've got that money, how do you leverage your collaborations, whether they are internal in the country with the private sector, with the third sector, or they are regional, or they are continental in our space, to be able to then think of pooled resources as a way of ensuring that young researchers can still access money in a variety of ways, of ensuring that the research agenda is focused on what is national, what is regional, what is continental. But we cannot run away from public funding of research. Public funding of research guarantees that we are able to actually own the research agenda. And that is so fundamental for the way that we build our national trajectories as states and also in the regions and the continents where we are.
Amen to that. Okay, Charlotte?
I think there's actually not much to add to this. It's one of those things where if you say it, you'd say, wouldn't it be ideal? But then the reality is that there are steps that one cannot take. So it becomes about how do we ensure that we can continue to do really strong international collaborations. It becomes about having researchers who can move across borders, who work in different countries and move around the world and get the skills from all the places they work and think and learn. It becomes about having open science, about sharing what we do so that it can be utilized everywhere. And those are the things that we have to think about, because can we turn this into a level playing field? No. But can we turn it into a level playing field insofar as we are able in terms of sharing what we do and allowing people to use and move that around the world? And that matters in terms of public funding of science and the openness of the science that we do.
Yep, great. Monica?
No, and I'll just end by saying that I have seen how our academic institutions leverage every dollar they get from public funding to the fullest. You know, everyone's heard the economic equation that $1 of NIH funding yields back $2.63 in terms of economic return. But when I think, of the years I spent in academia, that NIH grant that a young person gets opens up so many other opportunities to them, not only to them, but to their leaders who then can leverage every, that, first of all, that vote of confidence, but second of all, that first start really brings in so many other benefits. So it's the seed money that every institution can amplify. And taking away that seed money, I think I truly don't see a way without really radically changing the way we do things that we can replace that any other way.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question here. Are scientists whose population is too small in terms of voting, do our outcries really matter? Well, let me add a little bit to that, and that is that from my perspective, watching 6 million scientists argue about science and talk about science on the internet all day, what makes my job so much fun is watching all the different ways and styles with which people do that. And to me, that's a strength of science, that we have different cultures and different ways of expressing ourselves, and that we need to let everybody express themselves, especially in difficult and contentious times, in the way that helps their own psyche the best. But somehow we have to combine that with coming together to realize that everybody who's going to go about supporting science is going to do it in the way that's best for them, and that our intentions are all the same, because we need that unity and that understanding and that compassion for each other about how we express ourselves. So how do we get more of that? How do we get everybody in the scientific community fighting for science in their own different ways and have that add up to more than just the sum of its parts? And the people from around the world have lots of perspective on that. So Monica, easy question, you go ahead.
Easy. Well, I find it really challenging, frankly, to believe that people don't understand the value of science. I mean, look at this. We have a computer in our pocket. Everybody does. I mean, it's just, when you think about what's happened just in our lifetimes, it is incredible, and we marvel at that all the time, but I think others do too. So I don't think it is such a difficult fight. What I do think they have done, hey, myself included, is take it for granted. Really take it for granted. And, I was sitting here thinking this morning, did I ever think that we'd be sitting where we are today with how much I think we are contributing to the world as scientists? Did I ever think we'd be in a moment like this? Frankly, I didn't. Well, now we know we cannot take it for granted. So we got to fight for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Charlotte.
I think this refers to our previous answers we were talking about what should people do. It is literally that, don't take it for granted. We have an absolute responsibility. And this thing about, well, maybe there aren't that many scientists. Well, maybe there aren't, but there's certainly enough of us that we should be able to talk to a large number of other people. Universities are incredibly important institutions in their communities. They have impacts that are way beyond the set of students who happen to attend them. They are hugely sticky, if you like, I didn't quite know the words, sticky places that people stay, that grow companies around them, that create things around them. Yep. The research that is delivered, people often forget that it wasn't just a company that suddenly made the computer in our pocket. Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent on us to make sure they're reminded of that, because the companies might not want them to be reminded of that. So I absolutely agree. It is about, in some ways, I think it is about the fact that in some ways we have sat back and gone, isn't it obvious? And actually, maybe it isn't. And we have to stand up and say, no, I really would like to explain this to you. I really would, because actually I really think it matters. And actually it's really quite good fun and quite interesting if we keep going. And you'll find, I agree, I think it's not a hard sell once you begin.
Dorothy?
So I'm in agreement with the fact that it's not hard to sell and everybody should be able to take it. But the reality is that there are different senses of, do I trust science, that are actually taking place in our society. These are our taxpayers, right? And it's a taxpayer money that actually funds research. So for me, there is an internal sense of work that needs to be done within the enterprise itself to talk about how do we fund more meta science that helps us to understand the mechanics of science so that we can be able to transmit it back to the people that are speaking to the policymakers, back into our public engagement with science, for science programs, back into science education, so that we can increase the general literacy and therefore start rebuilding that trust in science. Because it's not out of nowhere that, yes, we mustn't take it for granted or we take it for granted. It's not out of nowhere that this mistrust in science is being seen across all societies. And so the scientific enterprise itself has to take it upon ourselves to actually make sure that we can do things very differently and to build that trust again with society.
Wonderful. All right, Maria. Yes, great. Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to backpedal a little bit about my damping down on panic. I think, if I think about the fact that the company that put that computer in our pocket and that should know better has just changed on their maps, the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America.
Yeah.
How can that be? How is that possible? These companies are the ones, and how come they're not defending us? They depend on our universities. They depend on the knowledge we generate. So I'm really concerned about that. And I don't understand it. Under the first Trump government, they did stand up to him. Now, nobody stands up. So here, we're fortunately in Europe, where I couldn't get into town today because of demonstrations against the right-wing lying, etc. So I do despair a little bit that this, maybe we've been taking it for granted for too long, and too many people are forgetting that it is necessary to fight and to stand up. So that's not a very nice way of concluding this very, very important discussion, but maybe it's an important one to remember. And it is also the one that Harold Varmus makes at the end of this.
Yes, and it's a reminder that the strength we have to all express ourselves in different ways is a very important one. So, yeah, thank you for that. And I'm not going to turn on my maps right now while I'm reading these questions off my phone. So I'm going to ask one last question, and apropos, I hope you'll be relieved that I'm not going to ask you what makes you hopeful, which is how these panels often end. I'm not going to tell you have to be hopeful if you don't feel hopeful. But what I am going to ask is for you to tell us, I went to graduate school in 1986 in the United States, and we had just started something called Graham-Rudman, which most of us are too young to know what that is, but it was this thing that was supposedly going to end support for science in America because it was a formula by which federal spending was going to be stopped. And so a lot of my friends, when I decided to do science instead of medicine, told me I was making a mistake because there wasn't going to be any money for science because of this Graham-Rudman thing that hardly anybody remembers. So for young people who are making a decision to go into science now, you know, we're starting to hear, well, people are thinking maybe that's not a good idea with all these crazy things going on, but science is all over the world, as we've been talking about, and these things are cyclical. So presuming we all agree that people should stay in graduate school or go on to graduate school if they're undergraduates, give them a little motivation to go home with. We'll start with you, Monica.
Sure. You know, I think not a single thing I accomplished alone. Every single step, you know, from the time I was really little, I wanted to be a scientist. That was very clear. I think you know, scientists are born, not made. And, but every single step of the way, somebody encouraged me, somebody taught me, somebody helped me tangibly, and that's the experience that I had throughout my entire life. And I still believe that that is how any of us get to where we are, and that's how any of us get to be scientists and be successful. And I just believe that we all have the ability to do that, and I think I have certainly experienced great willingness to do that by people who believe in science. So I don't think that is going to be squashed one bit by anything that's happening right now. In fact, it might even be inspired as it has never been before.
All right. Okay. Charlotte.
So I think I have to very much agree with everything that's just been said. And I think about it even like, why did I go on to go and go to graduate school? Why did I do this? And you know, I'm a UK academic. I didn't go into it for the money. But you went into it, and I think that you're right about the inspiration. People do actually want to change the world. They want to make a difference. If I talk to my students, why are they studying and working with me? Because they see a world full of problems that they want to help solve. Yeah. They want to be part of the solution, and they can see more and more clearly those problems sitting in front of them. They can see the things that need to change, and they want to be part of that change. And I think a lot of this is incumbent upon us to encourage them and say that they can do that. But also, I would be amazed if they don't step up and do it, because actually, usually when people try and tell people of a certain age or generation to not do something, they tend to then decide it's the best possible thing in the world to do. So we may get a very large number of science graduates quite soon.
Yes.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I told my daughter it was a dumb idea to be a vegetarian, and she's still a vegetarian.
Yeah, it's a very, seems to play that way quite well.
Yes. Dorothy.
In 2025, South Africa has the G20 presidency. There are 3 themes that our government has set: solidarity, equality, and sustainability. So I would say, do it differently. Do it differently together with others. Do it differently, respecting the diversity, equality, inclusion components. Do it differently as a young person in science so that you can contribute to the sustainability of our scientific enterprise.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, Maria, take us home.
Yeah, so I think do it differently is really the right thing to say, because that's what makes a scientist. I mean, discovery is about doing something that nobody else is doing. And if we're not doing discovery, then, you know, what's the point? So, and I actually think that is the saving grace, because I'm interested to hear that some people knew from childhood on that they were going to do scientists. I never knew what I was going to do the next day. So I'm not one of those. But I think, you know, curiosity is insuppressible in humans.
Oh, yes.
And even, you know, if we started from scratch, curiosity would win. So that's where I am very optimistic. There will be people who don't care about earning money or who don't care about hardship or whatever, who just want to find out stuff. And that is, by the way, not restricted only to science. Of course, as the ERC, we fund everything, also philosophy, religious studies, you name it, certainly gender studies. So I think it's all pervasive.
Wonderful. And you actually did all make me hopeful by taking the time to be here and to share perspective from so many different places and cultures. And this is a perfect way to end the conference. And so let's hear it for our fantastic panel. And so now, Willie May and Teresa Maldonado are going to come up and conclude our conference for us.
I don't know whether I was supposed to sit over there or stand up here, so I'm here now. He's gone. Thanks to Holden. And certainly thank to the panelists for such a wonderful discussion. Indeed, we must strengthen our investments to shape tomorrow's science. I think we all agree with that. So please join me in giving our panelists another round of applause. You can't see them, but I'm sure they can hear you. As we come to the end of another wonderful AAAS annual meeting, I'd like to conclude by thanking several important individuals and groups who have made all of this happen, most of them behind the scenes. You may have seen them running around, but not in the limelight. So they are due a great thank you and round of applause. Thanks to my colleagues of the AAAS Board of Directors for their support and partnership through all of this. We're running behind the schedule, so let's hold the applause until the end. Thanks to the leaders of the AAAS sections who contribute meaningfully to the meeting programming every year. In fact, they are the ones who roll up their sleeves and actually make this happen. If you aren't already a member of a AAAS section, you can join up to 3 by visiting your online member profile. So it's easy to do. And if not, there are folks at AAAS that can assist you in that regard. Certainly thanks to our CEO, our great and incomparable CEO, Sadhu Parikh, and his executive leadership team for all of their work and efforts. Thanks to the annual program committee. It was truly a pleasure partnering with you over the past year to make this possible, especially since you guys did most of the work. It is often a thankless job, but I know everyone in attendance here enjoyed and appreciate the fruits of your labor. And finally, to the AAAS Office of Meetings and Special Events team, led by Nicole Maylett and Jamie Stevens, for your many long hours, late nights, early mornings, putting up with me, that were required to bring all of this together. Thank you very publicly. So folks, I'm about to get out of Dodge. My last official duty in closing this annual meeting is to formally pass the baton to our incoming president, my friend, Teresa Maldonado. She will introduce the theme for our upcoming meeting in Phoenix. And thanks to all of you for making this meeting this year a success. It was one that was really timely and one that was really needed to bring about some healing in our community. So please join me in welcoming this year's president of AAAS, Dr. Teresa Maldonado.
Thank you so much, Willie. You've been an amazing partner this past year, and I look forward to working with you in your role as past president, so he's not escaping. There is no doubt that the year before us will be challenging, but I am happy to be tackling those challenges head-on with all of you. And I'm looking forward to channeling our energies over the next 11 months to preparing our 2026 annual meeting, which will be held in Phoenix. This event will be February 12th through 14th, so yes, once again, we're together on Valentine's Day. And it will be held in Phoenix, so there is no snow. And I want to publicly announce that I got my first Valentine in quite a while from Section R, so thank you, Section R. I am delighted to announce the theme of next year's meeting, which is Science at Scale. Now, I've had several people pull me aside and go, what do you mean by science at scale? And let me just give you some examples. We can talk about length. For nanoscientists, we can think about sub-nano to beyond kilometers. We can think of time scales from faster than picosecond to eons. We can talk about partnerships from the local level to international global partnerships. We can talk about scope, from subcellular systems in medicine to the study of the cosmos with extremely large telescopes and deep depths of the ocean with advanced submarine vessels and other technologies. Science is at a pivotal moment in which we are re-examining how research is funded by the public and private sectors. Science is at a pivotal moment in which we are seeking alternative ways for science to inform policy in the wake of the Chevron doctrine being overturned. Science is in a pivotal moment in which we are exploring how science must be implemented at scale for meaningful impact in different contexts, be it the local, regional, national, and global levels. Yet challenges and opportunities such as energy transitions, climate action, medical breakthroughs, the state of K through 12 education, and AI for all persist at unprecedented rates, urgency, and scale. Think about large-scale disasters such as the LA fires and the Maui fires, which had huge implications on our infrastructure, on water quality, on community health, on mental health, and certainly on the economy. These endeavors are complex socio-technical systems that require holistic in-depth studies of interdependent and authentic intersegmental trusted partnerships. So that's industry, academia, government, nonprofits. We also need the strong disciplines at the table. There's no way to do strong interdisciplinary work without strong disciplines and the breakthroughs that happen there. We need to bring disparate parties at the table, parties that have competing interests, cultures, timescales, and certainly incentive structures. More than ever, we must dare to explore the inconceivable and embrace informed risk. We're a country that does take risks, but we do it with information and not recklessly. But we also conceptualize value for the public good. Our communities of scientists, policymakers, the public and private sectors, and the general public are equal partners in integrative scaling of new knowledge, large-scale data, complex systems, and policy innovation for impact. We need the deep expertise here in this room and our colleagues who are not here to shape the science for tomorrow, as we've been discussing in this meeting. But to truly make impact for public value, we must be part of doing great science at scale. The submission site is now open for proposals, and I look forward to seeing all the wonderful session proposals that may be coming through. I think we have a big challenge this year, and we need the collective expertise and new ideas to make an impact. So I hope to see you in Phoenix. And I'd like to conclude this session. This was an amazing panel, by the way. Loved it. I want to invite you for a really magical evening at the Museum of Science, and I'm going to be the first one in the bus line. There is a shuttle bus service to the museum, and it's going to be, my understanding, a continuous loop, so you can return whenever you wish, so you're not there for a period longer than you wish. And so if you can join me right outside on the Boylston Street side to grab the shuttle buses to the museum and have engagement with SUDAP and the rest of the AAAS team and with each other. And I hope to meet with more of you at the reception. Thank you so much for being here. And I really enjoyed those I met one-on-one, and I hope to meet more of you tonight. Thank you.